Let's make sure I'm sharing properly here. And the title of my presentation is Bird Slavery and Memory, Finding West African Birds Among the Birds of Jamaica After 300 Years. So I would like to point out that what you are experiencing today is a part of a larger project which I started during COVID-19. This project is called Nanny Her Sword, a Sea Chiefess of the Blue Mountains Biodiversity, Forest and Waters. So most of you will not know because you're not Jamaican, but coming out of national independence in 1962, there was a process of identifying national heroes, local heroes of the island. And eventually there were 7 heroes chosen, including 2 former prime ministers, which were actually coming out of the process of gaining independence. But only one of these heroes was African-born. And this African-born person was a woman. She is known in Jamaica as Grandy Nanny. What her African name was lost to history, but she was from Ghana, Ashanti, and she arrived in Jamaica as a young girl and would go on to establish 3 villages in what is now the Blue and Dronka Mountains National Park and World Heritage Site. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site in eastern Jamaica, in the highest mountains on the island. So having worked in the community, descendants of Nanny, I learned a lot about her lived experiences, and I was very impressed. By that time, I had a master's in ornithology at that time. So this would have been when I was doing this work around 2004, around then. Freshly finished my master's. I learned a lot about Nanny in terms of what she knew about plants and birds. And I was very impressed because this was something which was never taught in schools, which was never shared in university classes at University of West Indies, in terms of local knowledge about birds, local experiences. You know, what you were taught in school was very much scripted and very much what you would experience in a university also in the United Kingdom, United States, or Canada. But there was never any reference in terms of local culture. So having completed my PhD at in New York, I returned to Jamaica in 2012, and I did a postdoc funded by the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. This is the Smithsonian National Zoological Park. Smithsonian, most people will know, is in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian Museum, etc. And this was a long-term study of 4 years. And the title of this postdoc was What Affects Knowledge Acquisition, Attitudes and Behavioral Intentions About Biodiversity Conservation on Jamaica. And for this, I did a case study where I randomly selected 500 students from 13 rural Jamaican high schools, so places it's not in the capital, lots of access to the outdoors, forested areas, secondary forests, etc. And followed these students from they were in second form, which is usually they're about 13 approximately when you're in second form high school in Jamaica, and until they were ready to be fifth formers and leave what was then called O levels and A levels, again, following the British system. So it's a long-term study, 500 randomly selected students across 13 high schools. So I'm just showing you some pictures of how it started pretty much. So the students here are approximately, again, 13 years old, and I'm actually leading them on field trips, teaching them about birds. If you look very closely in the picture on the left, you can see a young man in a red shirt, and he's holding a bird in his hand. It's a Jamaican oriole. It's an endemic Caribbean species, an endemic Jamaican subspecies. And we've just banded this bird, and we're allowing the students to then release the birds that the scientists have banded back into the forest. And in this picture right here, you can see my colleague, Dr. Hurlis Davis. And if you look very closely, he's holding a dove in his hand. It's called a Caribbean dove. It has a white belly. It walks on the ground, very similar to a dove that I will show you that exists in West Africa today. And the students are able to see the bird, take notes about the bird. The bird has been banded, and again, it's going to be released. They have binoculars and they have their notepads, and they're learning about the birds. So throughout this process, before they start the program of working with us and after, and there's a control group as well, because it's an experiment. So there are students who are also randomly selected, which I'm following, but they have not done the banding. They have not done the bird watching. They have not done these experiential firsthand interactive stuff about birds and bird watching. So again, this is a completely different study, which I would be happy to present on at another time. But just to summarize very quickly what the results of this long-term 4-year study showed was that these types of firsthand interactive experiences increased the knowledge of Jamaican students. Their knowledge increased radically. They were taught how many endemic birds were in Jamaica, about migratory birds, the names of various birds, the standard English names, that is. Basic ecology about the birds. And this was done one time when they were 13. And looking at the data year after year, even when they were fifth formers, those who were in the group that did the interactive experiences, that is the banding, the bird watching, the bird walks, etc., would remember details. The number of endemic birds on Jamaica, specific types of Jamaican birds, how many birds are found on Jamaica, etc., etc. So the postdoc carefully and deliberately, in a systematic way, shows that environmental and bird education works. It's a very important tool for educators at any level in terms of teaching people about birds, their value, their conservation importance, etc., etc. And this can be measured very carefully. There was something which I want to point out, which also came out as a finding, which is relevant to the project I'm doing right now. On the right, you can see I'm actually showing the students' pictures. Every student has a folder. Remember, 500 students randomly selected. And they are looking, you can't really see what they're looking at very well, but it's biologists. Overwhelmingly biologists working with birds, primates, etc., in the natural world, in forested settings, in savanna settings, etc., etc. And I'm asking them, using a social science research method called photo elicitation, what are they seeing in these pictures? Tell me what you see in these pictures. I'm not giving them any direction in terms of what to say. And then using a qualitative analysis method, I'm then coding what they're saying and picking out themes. One of the themes that emerged from this analysis, which is happening when they're now at the end of the project in fifth form, is very, very interesting for me. Because what they identified was that they said they was very clear they did not identify with biologists. Now, this was very important and also very, how should I say, traumatic for me, because I am a biologist and my field is biology. I do conservation work. It's what I do. It's my life. But it was very clear students did not either see themselves as conservation biologists and did not identify with conservation biologists. In fact, the students use certain types of metaphors to describe a conservation biologist. And I'll share this with you very carefully. So what this final, like the closing of the project showed that in terms of the perception of Jamaican high school students, again, they're now like 15, 16, some of them are even 17 in that age group because they're early fifth formers, who conserves wildlife and who is preserves wildlife. They describe that person as Tarzan. Now, if you know the story of Tarzan, Tarzan is a European man who finds himself as a young child, as a baby in Africa. And he's raised by these animals, but he's British elite. And he becomes this protector of the forest and the wildlife. So he's foreign, he's white, he's a man, he's very pro animals, but in the story of Tarzan, you never hear the story of the African. You never hear the African voice. You never see any Africans he's hanging out with, any local communities. And upon the arrival of Jane, who is also white European, he falls in love. And he learns to speak. He learns about the fact that, you know, he has this castle back in Europe. Ultimately, he decides to stay in Africa and protect the wildlife. But I was very surprised and very saddened that high school Jamaican students could actually describe this and felt that this was what my field of conservation was like. That this was things that white people do. They would use terms like, you know, white people in, like, you know, that's kind of a pseudonym to things that, you know, a local would not do, but somebody who is not only, because this was also very, very interesting. Not only that it was something that somebody who was white or Caucasian would do, but somebody who was not from here. That means who was not local born and bred. So this postdoc became a very important reflection point for me to kind of think about the question in like, why do Jamaicans think that the study of birds, the protection of birds, the love of birds and nature itself is something that is not Jamaican, is not something that Jamaicans would identify with, and this was something which was quote unquote white people in. So here is where I talk about who Jamaicans are and where we came from. So here I'm sharing you a published paper. It's a genetics paper published in 2017. And it's identifying Taino, which are the indigenous people that Europeans would have found when they arrived in the Caribbean in the 1400s, and Africans. And it's a comparison of the largest islands in the Caribbean: Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, which is two nations, Haiti on one side, the Dominican Republic on the other, and Puerto Rico. And the bar charts below give the genetic makeup in terms of the maternal ancestral lineage that now comprise or is ancestral to the human populations of these islands. In blue are the DNA, which is African. In yellow is the DNA, which is Native American or Taino. And in red is the European DNA. So what we can deduce from this study, this genetic analysis, is that Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico have disproportionately Native American and European ancestry. You can see lots of yellow and reds in these islands. Jamaica and Haiti are very different. They are overwhelmingly African in terms of their maternal ancestry. In fact, Jamaica is 98.5% in terms of that DNA going back to Central and Western Africa. Even more, a little bit more than Haiti. So one of the questions I'm asking, given this history, are there African ecological memories within Jamaican culture? Since we are really almost 100%, at least in terms of our mothers, from Ghana, Angola, Nigeria, Congo. What knowledge of the ecology did they bring and retain with them, if anything? Did they bring it and lose it because of persecution and oppression, part of the colonial experience, or has it been retained? Now, in this project, I have discovered that there's a whole range of ecological memories, even though I'm specifically interested in the memories and retentions that relate to birds. So next, I'm going to be sharing with you one of the better known memories, so to speak, that has been well recorded in Jamaica. So, and this is what Jamaicans know as, and people from West Africa will recognize as, are called the Anansi stories. So the source I'm sharing with you is from an author called Pamela Smith, and she wrote the stories of Negroes as they were described at that time by people who were commenting on her work in the late 1800s. So Pamela Smith was a British-born woman, and she came to Jamaica as a child, and she lived on the island until she was a college-age woman, at which time she came to the United States and ultimately back to the United Kingdom. So in the process of living on Jamaica, she lived in this rich cultural, remember again, 99% Africans at the time. And she wrote the stories that she heard these Negroes talking about. And one of her books is called Anansi Stories. So Anansi, of course, is a spider, and he is a part of multiple cultures in West Africa. And here you can see, this is a screenshot from the Kindle edition of the book Anansi Stories by Pamela Coleman Smith. It is published in 1899. And in this, one of the chapters, the first chapter of the book is called Anansi and Chim Chim. And you can see Anansi right here, the spider. And in Jamaica tradition, like everybody knows Anansi stories. And Anansi has children. The names of the children are the same as the names used in Ghana today. So that has survived over the last 300 plus years. And then there are characters that Anansi is interacting with in these stories. And again, these are characters which are from West Africa. So the leopard is in the story on Jamaica, but specifically going back to the birds, you can see Anansi is pointing to a bird nest here in this illustration in Pamela Coleman's book. So let's read the text briefly, and it says, in a long before time in this country, there lived Chim Chim bird. And Chim Chim bird build nest on the top of the grass so that it bow up and down with the breeze. And in the evening, when the north breeze blow, the nest go up and down and rock brother Chim Chim bird to sleep. And it goes on with the story. Now, if you notice in this picture as it is described, the bird builds its nest on the top of the grass. So first of all, let's think about this. It's an ecological story. It's about different fauna interacting together. And all the Anansi stories are about fauna interacting. So these are ecological stories, first of all. And they're ecological stories which came across the Atlantic over the last 300 years. So I want to point out that, again, because I know Jamaican birds so well, there is no Jamaican bird that has this pattern of nesting in reeds and, using building a nest on the top of the grass. So in the Jamaican context, this idea of this chim bird that building a nest on the top of the grass makes no sense, because this is just not happening in Jamaica. But it makes a lot of sense, in fact, if we recognize that this is not a real bird on Jamaica, but it's a memory. And it actually points this out in the start of the story. So the first term in the first sentence, in a long before time in this country, the term long before time in Jamaica as a phrase, long before times, is used by Jamaicans when they're talking about something which is not present. It's something which happened in the past, long in the past. It's a historical happening. So it says, in a long before time in this country, there lived Chim bird. So the first sentence also suggests, in a long before time in this country, that it actually is something which potentially is not happening only in the past, but is before the narrator arrived where they are today. That there lived this bird called Chim. So again, this bird doesn't exist in Jamaica, so there's no bird physically that Jamaicans can point to as a Chim bird. It's only known from the Anansi stories. So yes, so we can see how these ecological stories are embedded in even in the folklore of the island. So before continuing, I want to point out that this project is a very difficult project. It is important, again, for the reasons which I started looking at my postdoc, that Jamaicans are looking for connections in terms of their identity. My postdoc carefully documented and clearly documented that Jamaicans were not seeing their faces, their identity in what the world calls ornithology, the study of ornithology, and even in zoology as a field overall. And they felt that this thing that we're talking about, ornithology, zoology, is something which is foreign, which is imposed and has no connection to themselves. In the NANI project, my intention is actually to counteract that argument, to saying, actually, no, we have been talking about biodiversity and birds ever since. We arrived in Jamaica talking about these things, and we continue to talk about these things. What actually has happened is that there's a disconnect between what people see as culture and what people see as ornithology. And as I progress, you're going to see more and more that these cultural things are not only like the Chim bird, which is a fable or a mythology, a Nancy story, but that these things are actually very tangible. So let me talk about why this project is difficult and why what we're doing today is so important. So first of all, birds are usually studied by regions. So one of the things which was very clear when I joined the Society for Conservation Biology was that, you had the Africa region, you had the Asia region, the Australia region, the Europe region, the North America region, Oceania, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So Latin America and the Caribbean, we talk together because our birds are very closely related. The African people are kind of talking together. And there are international meetings of the society, but there's not a lot of exchange, at least about culture, between these regions. So those discussions are not happening. Also, we can recognize that ornithology and the study of life in terms of life sciences has undergone heavily standardization because of European colonial powers. So that all birds have linear names, a genera, a species. New species are usually named commonly after European elites in terms of the person who discovers a new species naming it after themselves. And there is a erasure of the traditional names and ways of knowing. That locals might know a bird by certain names, but then it gets named under the Linnean system or the standard English name by another name, and then that connection is lost. There is a general lack of publication of interdisciplinary work between biodiverse and cultural studies, and biologists tend to frown on cultural studies as not scientific, not science, because this whole thing we talk about culture and history, like it's a lot of fluff and interesting, but it's not important. It's not science, as you would frequently hear. And also, finally, which is so interesting as well, that Western educated ornithologists and biologists from Africa, from the diaspora, and by that Jamaicans, etc., often stigmatize local traditional knowledges, unless that this knowledge it is perceived that it can actually advance nature conservation and preservation, but otherwise it is often stigmatized. So let me give you just a few examples of what we're talking about. So growing up in Jamaica, I knew owls, the Jamaican brown owl and the barn owl, as patu. And this is a common word on Jamaica. You can stop any 4-year-old on the street in Jamaica and ask them, what is a patu, and they'll tell you it's an owl. Well, this is an Akan word. Patu is still a word which is common in Ghana today, and it means owl. It's a tree word. And you can also see how the Jamaican owl, even on the left, which is an endemic genera and species, the Jamaican brown owl, is also pretty similar to the Fraser's eagle owl in terms of physical features, the bird color shape, etc. And this is actually a picture from Western Ghana. And if we look in this publication of the naming systems of Akan people in Ghana, published in 2015 in the Journal of Ethnobiology, we can see very clearly here, if you look on the Strigidae, that all these owls are patu, patu, patu here. And this is just a few of the many owls in Ghana. So again, you can see that this was a word which was very common used, and it came across with the transatlantic slave trade to Jamaica. So another example. So in this case, I'm showing you an example which is relatively new. This is actually something which was a discovery just last summer, and it happened on a call just like we're doing today. So what I'm showing you is the chestnut-bellied cuckoo of Jamaica, and this is actually a screenshot from eBird of the species. It's a Jamaican endemic, beautiful bird, and well-known, a very common species. Now, the chestnut-bellied cuckoo has many local names on the island of Jamaica. It's called hunter, rainbird, oldman bird, oldman breako. So I gathered a group of friends last June, so just less than a year ago, and we were chatting and texting online. One of the people on the call was a colleague, Kofi, who is Ghanaian. He's an ornithologist. He lives in Accra, and he was on the call. I actually met Kofi at a conference about 10 years ago while I was on the board of the Society of Conservation Biology. So I'm just screenshotting the exchange that was happening and the pertinent aspect of it. So you can see, this is just in the text on Zoom, a screenshot of what was happening. So Kofi says, now, Leo, what is the name again? So this is where I had mentioned the names of the birds just as I had a while ago. So again, think about it. We're looking at a bird. I'm saying this bird, it's called old man bird, breako, old man breako, rain bird hunter. And Kofi, who is in Ghana, driving and texting at the same time, he's not the person at the wheel, thankfully, asked me to repeat the name that I said for the chestnut-bellied cuckoo. So I typed breako in the text, and he said, a bird, and Kofi responds, a bird? And I respond, breako bird. And I said, old man breako, which is another name. And Kofi says, sounds like breako in tree, which is the kukal. This was a very big revelation for myself and everybody on the island of Jamaica, because it was unknown until June of 2023 that there was a bird in West Africa that had a name that sounded strikingly similar to the chestnut-bellied cuckoo, the endemic chestnut-bellied cuckoo of Jamaica. So once Kofi said that, it sounded like the kukal, breako, I grabbed my birds of Ghana, which I have. You can see it if you can see my screen, and I flipped around, and lo and behold, it was quite clear that, goodness gracious, the chestnut-bellied cuckoo of Jamaica, which is endemic, it's only found on the island of Jamaica, that Jamaicans have called breako for the last 200 to 300 years, looks so much like the Senegalese kukal, which is called breako in tree. Again, it appears to be a memory. Not only that, when I went to the community that the people of Nani of the Maroons, again, Nani was an Akan woman and she established these communities in the mountains, they had songs that they would sing about breako. They celebrated this bird, and they knew that this word, breako, was a word that came from West Africa. What they did not know was what the word meant, what it was a name of. But they knew that they had this bird in the community that they call breako. They had songs that they would sing about breako, and they knew that the word was an African word. So they had a lot of the pieces, but just not that final piece to recognize that the Senegalese kukal, again, a common bird in sub-Saharan Africa, was a bird that they were actually having a memory about. The final case I'm going to share with you is the nightjar, Xanthophe anoma. And in Akan mythology, it is called the dilemma bird. So it is called the dilemma bird in Akan mythology because the story is told that if you find the nightjar, you're faced with a dilemma. If you take up the bird, you are taking up trouble. And if you bring it to your house, you're bringing trouble to your home. But if you leave the bird where it is or you put it back, you're either losing something which is potentially valuable, or you're putting down trouble. So what should you do in that situation? Having found the bird, confronted the word bird, do you take it up because it could be a treasure? Do you put it back down because it could be a treasure, but it could be something very dangerous for your family and in terms of trouble for your family? What do you do? It's a dilemma. And again, this is a mythology that is well known in Akan culture, and it is used and deployed in various social settings. For example, when there was oil mining in over the last 10, 20 so plus years, the discovery of oil in certain parts of Ghana, People use the mythology of the Akan bird to describe it, like, is oil a blessing? Is it a curse? Do we leave the oil where it is? Do we use it? If we use it, are we causing trouble? If we leave it, are we leaving a wonderful thing that is going to make us all wealthy? Such a dilemma, such a hard choice. So the Sanchofe anoma is not, the nightjars of West Africa are obviously not in Jamaica. They're not in the Caribbean. But we have other nightjars in Jamaica. The most common of is Antillean nightjar, and it is called Gimme Me Bit. So the name is different. It's not the same, but the Gimme Me Bit of Jamaica, if you look at, so here I'm showing you actually a screenshot from the Dictionary of Jamaica, and it has a recording from the year 1900 by Murray, who's writing something, a saying that Jamaicans had. It says, "Marry the gimme bit a one thing. Take me up, you take up trouble. Put me down, you put on trouble." It's the same, pretty much verbatim expression, the same mythology, the same meaning that is used in Ghana. And this expression has been present on Jamaica for up to 300 years, and it's still used in Jamaica today. So in this case, we can see that unlike the Breko, where the name has been maintained, in the case of the lemma bird of Ghana, the name has been lost. However, the expression associated with the gimme me bit is still a part of Jamaican culture and is still deployed by Jamaicans in certain social settings when it is appropriate to speak about dilemma within Jamaican culture. The final example I'm going to show you, I'm not going to dwell on this one very much, is this bird here is the Spindalis. So it goes by many names in Jamaica and the Caribbean. It's called Markhead, Chambabiza, etc. And this bird, the name Chambabiza is actually a bird which is related to Nigerian culture, because the Chamba people, or Champa people, are one of a very small group of people between Cameroon and Nigeria. And some of the local names of this bird go back to Congo and Nigeria. So just in my ruminations, my thinking, again, looking at various field guides, etc., I've also kind of questioned whether or not, and I don't have an answer for this, whether or not, the golden-breasted bunting here, which is an African bird, were Jamaicans thinking about this bird? Why did this bird have meaning to Afro-Jamaicans? And why did they give the name of a tribal people between Cameroon, between Nigeria, to this bird? Why did they give names related to marking of the flesh from the Congo language to this bird? It also looks, again, like the Cabanese bunting, again, just me thinking out loud. So we're running out of precious time, but what I wanted just to share very briefly and very quickly to end are some birds which look a lot like birds which are in Jamaica, which I'm now trying to find out the local names of these birds or sayings related to these birds to then try and match what I know in terms of my own lived experience that people name, say, call, or beliefs about these birds on Jamaica. African jacana in Jamaica goes by many names, most commonly Queen of Birds. It's also known by the name Jesus bird, but that is a relatively new name when you look at the literature. Again, for the last 50 to 100 years when Christianity became popular on the island. And this name Jesus bird has spread all over Australia, etc., where there are jacanas. But historically, it was called the Queen of the Birds, Queen of Birds, various other names, but looks very similar to the jacana. Jacana spinosa is the Latin name in Jamaica. Weaver birds. Africa has many species of weaver birds, including the village weaver. I'm also trying to find out more about local names of the weaver bird and sayings, beliefs about weaver birds in various West African cultures. The tambourine dove, again, looks almost identical to a dove in Jamaica, which has a lot of spiritual meanings for Jamaicans. Nothing is known about West African beliefs, local names, mythology about this bird so far to help us to identify and make the connection in terms of what Jamaicans are actually speaking about in terms of these names and mythology that they use. The blue-spotted wood dove in Jamaica, again, is associated using sayings, names, beliefs with point to West Africa, but nothing is known by Jamaicans in terms of local names, local beliefs about the blue-spotted wood dove that can help us to make any further connections. So again, my time is pretty much out. So I just wanted to thank all of you for this opportunity to present. There's so much more that I could share, similar to what you just heard in terms of Jamaican birds with African names or African sounding names, beliefs which point to Africa among several species, some of which are documented, some of which I have discovered dealing mostly trips or interacting with Ghanaian ornithologists. But I appreciate your time. And again, I would encourage any and all of you who would like to keep in contact with me, or to, if anything resonated or sounded familiar, or you wanted to add any information to the Google Doc, it would be very important for us at the Institute of Jamaica and BirdLife Jamaica to continue to think about the connections between Jamaican birds, Jamaican history, and our foreparents in Central and Western Africa. Thank you all so much. And again, thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leo, for this brilliant and insightful talk. Really, we appreciate sharing your knowledge from Jamaica all the way down to us in West Africa, Nigeria. Naibab is saying a very big thank you. And thank you also very much for all that were able to join today's talk. And before going any further, we want to hear from you if you have any questions for Dr. Leo, right? You can actually just put it directly in the chat, or you can just raise up your hand, then you ask him directly. But please do kindly help in filling the Google form. As Dr. Leo has mentioned, it will go a long way in connecting all these different cultures and putting identity on some of these birds, mythology, and connections as well. So thank you once again, Dr. Leo. So please, anyone with questions for him?
Yes, while we wait on questions, I would just like to add that even if you don't have a specific thought or about a specific bird for the Google Doc, if you just like to keep in touch, please add your name and information. I definitely feel that I'm going to be getting to Nigeria at some time, and I'd love to be able to interact with like-minded colleagues at that time. I'm actually going to be in Ghana in October, and looking forward to further trips.
So anyone with question for him? Yeah, obviously, Dr. Leo, probably all of us on the call have really, really understood what you're trying to pass across. And I'm very sure people will drop in their contact, and others will also be kind enough to fill in the form. I was able to just click on the link that you have sent. Even though it's asking for permission, I guess you will do justice to that.
I see. Oh, I see. Well, thank you
Yeah.
for pointing that out. Let me see what's happening here.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I see. Yes, I see. Okay, good, good, good. So thank you for pointing that out, because I've just adjusted it now that individuals should be able to type in there. Yes, I also see Joseph's comments, and thank you, Joseph, because that's a very important point I wanted to. I meant to actually add your point here to the barriers that make the project very difficult, because the countries of all the countries, if you think of what is now considered Congo or Nigeria or Angola, all of these places that Jamaican ancestors came from, different languages, different cultures, and some of these cultures maybe no longer even exist. They were completely destroyed by the slave trade and the European imperialism, particularly the smaller communities or the smaller groups. So in some cases, there could be some knowledge that has been lost, and connecting with in any one culture with all the cultures is almost impossible. So that is definitely something that makes what we're trying to achieve challenging. But nevertheless, as you can see, we're still making important progress.
Okay, so thank you so very much. But Dr. Leo, there's something that you mentioned about the children that you work with. And it's amazing that they get to know about Tarzan, but then they don't know anything about the folklores in Jamaica. And it actually is showing how important your project is. Because who are we, a people without identity? And then the only thing that we can link with is ornithology with a male, with a white male. It's actually ridiculous when I'm trying to think about it in my head.
Yes.
We are lucky on this side of West Africa. Nigeria, we've gone a bit ahead. And we are actually grateful for the Epiliventis Ontological Research Institute for the privilege to actually broaden our knowledge in the aspect of ornithology. So we get to teach our children, we get to go to visit different schools to give them all this knowledge, but then it is very important that we actually join it with our culture, because you mentioned that when it comes to like talking about it from the traditional aspect, then it seems as if it doesn't have any validation. It looks as if we're looking completely down on ourselves. We don't appreciate the African perspective in ornithology. And so we allow the foreign language to overtake everything. So I don't really blame the kids. It's actually difficult to link to something that doesn't have your name tag on it. So really, really, it's very impressive what you're doing, and well done with it. I hope that we on this call and many others that will get access to the Google Meet link, that they will be able to give in their input, and it will actually be very, very nice to finally meet you in person and to interact more on this topic. So thank you so much, Dr. Leo. And on this note, I want to thank each and everyone for joining the call, and we're looking forward to have you next month because NIBAP webinar is a monthly webinar, and we always have interesting topics to share and to learn more about the environment, about birds, and about different people, and like today, about cultures and how birds actually link us together. So thank you so much for joining. Yes, we'll share the recordings after this, and I hope we'll have more and more inputs to give at the end of it all. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Leo. I don't know if you have anything to wrap up with before we all call it a day.
Yes, just to say thank you again. I don't know how many of you are members of the Society for Conservation Biology, but if you are, or if you attend future meetings, so definitely please look out for me, because most likely in terms of the the global meetings of the Society, I will be there. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to further interaction. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Dr. Leo. Good evening, colleagues and students from Nigeria. Thank you once again for joining, and do have a wonderful time for the rest of the day. So see you again. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.